Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we are doing something slightly different because I've been doing an awful lot of reviews recently and have kind of neglected a lot of the other sort of videos that I used to make. And well, that was because I felt like there was just so many ships that I didn't just get around to reviewing it, and I'm far from being finished, but I feel like I'm a little bit back on track with these sort of things. And I've gotten a couple of things out of the way that I really wanted to do. So today we'll be doing something slightly different. We'll be looking at how to aim your torpedoes. So if you're a regular tier 10 player or a destroyer main and you know everything about torpedoes, feel free to skip this one because I am going to cover a bunch of basics, but also I'll try to, convey as much information as possible, but it's more geared towards people who are relatively new to the game or to playing destroyers in general or to torpedoing stuff. So, to the torpedoes. The torpedoes obviously are the destroyer's main weapon because destroyers don't have many guns and the guns are very low caliber, so they don't do an awful lot of damage. So it's all about the torpedoes. Now the thing is, with guns, you can, even with the biggest guns, you shoot them every 20 odd seconds or so. With the torpedoes, not so much, because it's going to take a while to reload. So even we're looking at the mid-tier Dominikaze here, the Japanese mainline destroyer. She gets 3 twin launches of torpedoes and they take 38 seconds to reload. So you want to get your torpedoes on target because you're not going to get an awful lot of them. And if you're actually looking higher, usually the higher you go, the longer it takes. So if we're looking at the Xianyang, the Pan-Asian Tier 8 destroyer, we're talking about 68-second reload. So reloads are definitely across the minute mark in higher tiers. So if you waste your torpedoes, you've wasted an awful lot of damage potential that you had as a destroyer, as a torpedo boat destroyer. So what do we need to know about torpedoing things? Well, let's think about it. Let's think about it as if you're a hunter, right? So let's say you're stalking a deer. This might be a foreign concept to people who have neither hunters nor deers in their countries, but please replace that with game wildlife of your choice in your particular region. So you're stalking something, and you're trying to get, you're trying to kill something. Not that I have personal experience with, but the principle is remarkably similar. What you want to understand, or what you need to understand, are several things. You need to obviously understand your weapon, and you need to understand your target. You need to be able to predict what it's going to do next. You need to know where it's going, where it will be. And this is the same story with destroyers, especially with stealth destroyers. So if we're looking at the torpedoes, there are several important values here. So let's go back to the Dominikaze and start here. The Dominikaze has a 7.5 kilometer torpedo range. The detection range, the surface detection range of the Dominikaze is 5.8 kilometer. So you can fire your torpedoes without being seen, which is generally a good idea because once again we're talking about figuring out what your target is doing, and if your target can see you and they know it's a destroyer and they know it has torpedoes, then they're relatively likely to, if they know how to do something about it. Whereas if they can't see you, they will notice the torpedoes as soon as they come in. So let's try a bunch of basics and just about how would you align your torpedoes, and then we get to some of the more interesting topics into how to make them actually get on target. All right, so here we are, and there's a target ship that we'll be trying to torpedo. Now let's go over a bunch of the controls. So obviously you have your torpedoes mounted. Some destroyers have them centerline mounted, some destroyers have them side mounted. But this green area that you see here, like this green parallelogram or whatever that is, this is the area in which your torpedoes arm. So if you look very closely, and like there's a little semicircle here, and if you torpedo anything within that area which is not shaded green, then your torpedoes will not arm. So they have a minimum distance that they need to run from your ship before they can arm. You will also notice that you have two spreads. If we're currently on a wide spread, you can switch to a thin spread. So this is a narrow spread. The spread is literally what it says. The further away your torpedoes get, they don't move along. They don't move next to each other. They move in a fun pattern, and the gaps will widen as the torpedoes go. The idea is that the wider the spread, the better chance that you get something on target, whereas the more narrow the spread, the better chance you get everything on target. But of course, also the higher the risk that you get nothing, because if they dodge, it's easier. Anyway, so you see this gray aiming circle here, aiming line here. This is pointing towards the target ship. Now, currently it's pointing directly at the ship because, the ship is moving. So what happens if the ship moves? And now we go. We see that the target line starts moving as the ship moves ahead. The faster the ship goes, the more ahead the line goes as well. Now you see that the line has stopped moving or stopped accelerating, and it's steady. Right? You can hold your torpedoes over it and you see it's steady. So now the ship is sailing at a constant speed. And now we're going to stop it again. And you can see, as we're stopping it, that the torpedo line recedes as the ship slows down. So this is a predictive line that tells us where the ship is going to go. The other thing that's really important, and you've seen this there for a second, is that I was spotted. Now you see that dotted line around myself there, and you see the solid line. The solid line is my torpedo range. It depends on the weapon. You see, if I change to my guns, it's a smaller circle. If I change to my torpedoes, it's a longer circle, because my torpedoes have a 7.5 kilometer range, whereas my guns only have 6.68 kilometer range. So the circle, or the gap between the dotted line is where I'm spotted, and the solid line is where my torpedoes will run out, because if they run too long, they run out of steam. So right now I'm unspotted. But if I'm going to get a little bit closer, and let's get a little bit closer to the target ship, as soon as it crosses the dotted line, and there's no solid cover in between the two of us, there you see, now I'm detected. So now the target knows that I'm coming, because they've seen me. Well, it's still a possibility that they don't know, but it's entirely possible that they have realized that I'm there, and they will start taking evasive maneuvers. So what does that have to do with the torpedo aiming indicator? Well, the torpedo aiming indicator works under the assumption that the ship continues to sail in the same direction at the same speed. So this is a predictor, right? So if we're firing our torpedoes, it'll take a while to get there. So I'm going to fire one torpedo spread, and then just kind of follow it here. And you see this is taking a fair amount of time until the torpedo gets there. So what the aiming indicator tells you is, in however long it takes, what is that, like 15-20 seconds, that it gets your torpedoes to get on target, provided that the target is continuing with the same speed and on the exact same course, that's where it's going to be when the torpedoes get there. Now the problem is, obviously, the longer it takes you, the longer it takes the torpedoes to get there, the higher the chance that the target is going to do something. So, like for example, let's say we are aiming at the target is sitting still, and we're going to fire our torpedoes along the indicator. But now the target starts moving. And you can see the indicator moving as well. Well, you can see the torpedo indicator starts moving because the ship has started moving. So you see all these torpedoes are going to miss because at the time when we fired them, the ship wasn't moving. Whereas now that the torpedoes have reached the point, the ship is moving, which means the torpedoes have missed. So the torpedo indicator is an assistant that tells you one thing and one thing only. Provided that the target stays at the same speed and at the same course, that's where the target is going to be when your torpedoes get there. The further away you are, the longer it takes your torpedoes to get there. So what you want to do is you want to obviously be in that sweet spot. You want to have your target in between the dotted line and the solid line on your minimap, because that means you're not spotted and the target is within your torpedo range. bunch more important factors. What if the target is moving away from you? So let's get the target moving again, and we're going to get it to turn away. And you can see it on the minimap. The target is sailing away from us, so it's going to sail in a constant speed. I'm sending the torpedoes after it, but the target is moving outside the solid circle. There it goes. We're going to stop the target again. And you see these torpedoes are running true. They would probably hit the target. Well, we can't even see the target anymore. We're going to have to run after it. The problem is the target's too far away. So you see the torpedoes have run out of steam, and they haven't hit the target because the target was sailing away from us. And the time it took the torpedoes to get there, the target actually ran outside the maximum range of the torpedoes. Now, there are several things that you need to take into account. You need to take into account, am I spotted or am I not spotted? Does the target know that I'm coming? Is the target likely to continue sailing in the same direction but at the same speed for the time it takes my torpedoes to get there? How close can I get for an ideal drop on my torpedoes without being spotted? Let's try something slightly different. You see the target? The target ship's just sitting there, right? And I'm completely spotted because it is within my dotted line. But there's an island. So what if I'm going to position myself such that the island is between myself and the target? So I'm going to sail over here, and then we're going to stop the ship. And you see, I am no longer spotted. The reason I'm no longer spotted, and I can't see the target either because it works both ways, is that there's an island in between us. But you do realize that the target is much closer than my surface detection range. So if we start moving the target forward, then we should see it coming around the island any second there. And then we can try dropping some torpedoes onto it. Any minute now. it's not a particularly fast ship. It should come around the island. This is easier if there it is. So now we can drop the torpedoes, and we were spotted, but notice that it is well within my actual range, and we could get even closer. The minimum detection range is, I'm not 100% sure what it is, 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers or something. So these are all very important factors that you need to take into account when you're dealing with trying to find out where to drop your torpedoes. So there's one more thing that I want to talk about, and then we look at some real-world scenarios. For the next item, I've got the Xianyang here because she has slightly wider torpedo angles, so it's a little bit easier to see. Now, you're having a target in your sight, and you've got two torpedo launchers. So you're very much tempted to just, aim down the aiming cone and fire them both right after each other. You don't necessarily want to do that unless you're really, really certain that your torpedoes are going on target, because if you fire two spreads right behind each other, that means the second spread is actually, going to run in exactly the same pattern as the first spread, which means that in between the torpedoes, and as you can see, if one a wide spread, they are going to spread out wide quite a bit. There's going to be a lot of gaps. Instead, what you want to do is you want to offset your torpedoes a little bit. So you fire the first launch, like let's say you fire straight on the aiming cone, and then you want to do the second one a little bit offset, such that the torpedoes are filling each other's gaps and kind of have the same distance from each other. So let's try that out. First spread out, second spread offset, second spread out. And let's observe the torpedoes. And as they are going, you see that they're kind of filling the gaps behind each other, such that it is more difficult to get in between. Now, the other thing that we're observing is that this St. Louis over there is actually bow in. So the St. Louis is taking two torpedoes, and that's it. The rest of the torpedoes have not hit. And the reason for that is that the St. Louis is obviously a much smaller target, being bow in, than if she was if we were firing at her from the broadside. So if we're going to go a little bit forward and just observe the size of the target here, then you see that, I mean, we're still, you can observe it on the minimap. You see that obviously the more sideways you're going to get, the more space you have for torpedoes actually to hit. So if we're doing the exact same thing again, and we're spotted, so we're a little bit too close, but let's just kind of stop here. So now the target is pretty much, well, it's not completely broadside, but it's close to. So if we're firing our spreads again now, then we're observing how many torpedoes we're going to get on target. Obviously, it's going to be a lot more of them. So you want to have your torpedoes hitting the target at somewhat of an angle, as flat an angle as possible, because then you're actually going to be able to destroy it or get more torpedoes on target than if the target is bow in. All right, let's move on to some real-world scenarios and see this all in action. In our first scene, we're once again out in the Minakaze, the Tier 5 Japanese destroyer, and we're lining up a shot at a Giulio Cesare over there, a Tier 5 premium battleship. So what's important to keep in mind? Remember, the aiming cone shows you where the target is currently where the target will be when the torpedoes get there, if it remains at the speed and direction it's currently going. So we need to observe this Giulio Cesare and actually get an idea what he's doing. So let's see how this pans out. Now, observing with, and here we are spotted. Now you're observing with the torpedo aiming indicator that the Giulio Cesare has come out of a turn. So that's another thing. A ship slows down when it goes into a turn. So if you're aiming with the torpedo aiming indicator while the ship is in the turn, you will aim at the solution will be calculated at a slower speed, because the ship has bled speed while in the turn. As soon as the ship straightens out, it'll speed up again, which means if you're firing your torpedoes at a ship along the indicator at a ship that is in a full turn, you're going to miss, because the ship will accelerate out of the turn. So you need to lead your torpedoes or just keep observing the target. Now in this case, I am spotted because I got because I think I've been firing my guns as well at some point. So my bloom is still up. So I am spotted, but I am observing the target. I'm not yet firing my torpedoes. He is slowing down a little bit, and at this point he seems to be relatively on a stable position, and he has turned to engage that Kaiser over there, which is on low health. But he can't go anywhere. He is sitting next to that island, and you can see he's firing at the Kaiser in order to kill the Kaiser. So my torpedoes are actually coming on target, even though they were fired along the line during a turn. Most of them hit the target. And now I can use my guns to finish off that unlucky Giulio Cesare. Because he was focused on a different target, so he hasn't really noticed that I was around and that I was going to torpedo him. Now in this second example, we are lining up an enemy bogue. And, well, it's a carrier. The carrier knows that he's spotted, because I can see him. And if he has any awareness, he should know that there's a destroyer coming into him, because, well, who else? He can't see me, but I can see him. And carriers have reasonably good detection, so it's quite likely that there's a destroyer here. But, you know, carriers actually focus oftentimes on controlling their air groups and are not necessarily paying attention to, you know, at least, especially in mid-tiers, to what their actual ship is doing. So in this case, the torpedo indicator tells us that the bogue is not moving. It doesn't have his engines running, he's stationary, which makes sense because it's a carrier and it's mid-tier and he's focusing on carrier drops. So once again, I'm trying to get as close as possible without being spotted. And then I am going to drop my torpedoes straight down the aiming cone because the bogue isn't moving. Now I have to make sure that I won't get spotted because otherwise he knows that I'm here. And in which case he might start actually switching on his engines. I mean, he will notice once the torpedoes get spotted, but by that time it is too late for him to start moving. So we'll just wait for the torpedoes to hit. And I have made sure that I am outside of the aiming circle and there are the torpedo hits. Now it hasn't been quite enough to take out the carrier. But my torpedoes are reloading very quickly. So I am, I just need I don't need a perfect hit. I just need a little bit of a hit. But you see from the smoke and from the torpedo indicator that the carrier has started moving because he has realized that he's being torpedoed. So I'm dropping a little bit more of a widespread in a kind of the general direction to to see if I can catch him. The other thing that you can obviously do in a scenario like this is to, well, just rush the carrier and get close and drop him from close range, which makes it much, much harder to dodge. But the thing is, it's not just that the carrier will spot you and there he's dead, even though we just needed 2 torpedo hits. It's not just that the carrier that needs to spot you. It's that everybody else will see you as well, which means that well, a lot of people will start actually potentially shooting at you. In this third example, we're out in the Xianyang. We're in an epicenter mode, and we are in the center cup. We're sitting in the smoke currently. Our torpedoes are ready, and there's a North Carolina sailing. Now, once again, that North Carolina is sailing in a straight line, and you can observe that by just looking at the torpedo indicator. And he's also busy shooting at someone else. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to aim around pretty much the torpedo indicator, because I don't expect him to be paying attention that there are torpedoes coming in. And as we can see here, he hasn't been paying attention. So 7 of my torpedoes have hit and almost killed the North Carolina. I could have even gotten a little bit closer, but obviously the problem is you then get exposed, and there's an Edinburgh back there, and there's a Cleveland around here somewhere as well. So you do need to weigh the risk of being spotted and taking damage from a ship that actually knows that you're coming and is focusing on you, against the risk of not hitting all your torpedoes. So you want to observe your target and see what it's doing. So now I'm going to unspot it again because I haven't been firing my guns. And there's some incoming fire, which is why I haven't fired my guns, because there are 2 very dangerous cruisers there. Now look at that Alsace over there and observe the torpedo indicator. You see that he's moving, right? You've seen it on the torpedo indicator, and you see that he's moving forward. The thing is, he can't move forward because there's an island in the way. So I am actually sending the torpedoes down this line. I am not sending them where the indicator points it. The indicator doesn't know about the island. The indicator says if the Alsace, with the speed that he has set, is going to get moving, then he's going to move to that position. But because he got stuck on an island, he's not going to move. Now he starts moving, but at this point my torpedoes are already coming in, and I still managed to get 2 torpedoes in. It would have been a lot more if he hadn't moved out, but that's kind of what I mean with you have to observe the situation. You have to observe what your target is doing, and you have to get an idea about where it's going to be by the time that your torpedoes get where they get to the target. Which brings us to some final points that I'd like to make. So let's take a very quick look at the Xianyang's torpedoes. There are 2 important things here that I would like to point out to you. First of all is the torpedo speed. The faster the torpedoes, the shorter the time that it takes for your torpedoes to get on target, and the less time the target has to actually avoid. In general, you should try to get as close as possible, but note that ships have different torpedo speeds. So for example, the Swedish or Pan-European destroyers have very, very fast torpedoes. So while the Xianyang's torpedoes did 67 knots, these torpedoes are doing 86 knots. So these torpedoes are much, much quicker, which reduces the time that they take to get on target, and which makes it more difficult to avoid. The next thing that you need to be aware of, if you're planning to play a torpedo destroyer and you want to play on stealth, and you don't want to be seen, but you want to you're playing a ship that is better suited to play from stealth, like a Japanese destroyer, is know what your target is capable of. So let's say you're lining. Let's say you're playing a Minakaze, right? So what you want to do is you want to take a look around in the tech tree, because you're in tier 5, which means you're going to play tier 4, 5, and 6. And you want to take a look at the tech tree and see what else is sailing around at these tiers. So for example, if you look at the German tech tree, and you see at tier 6, for example, there is the Bayern. And you note that the Bayern has a sonar. A sonar means that instead of spotting the torpedoes, and I can't remember what the initial spotting values are. They depend on the torpedo, the exact torpedo a little bit, but it's somewhere around 1.5 kilometers or something. it increases that to 3.75 kilometers. So if you're trying to torpedo a ship that has sonar and they have seen you, or they know that you're in the area, there's a fair chance that they have the sonar running and they see your torpedoes coming from almost 4 kilometers away. In which case, there's a much higher chance that they're not going to be able to, that they're going to be able to avoid the torpedoes. The other thing, obviously, is maneuverability. So if you're aiming at a destroyer that is in a busy dogfight with another destroyer, there's very little chance that this thing is even going to still maintain course and speed. And even if it did, a destroyer noticing torpedoes has not much of a problem to dodge these, right? So because it only takes, for example, for the Skater, which also has a sonar, it only takes just about 8 seconds to come to a full stop. And it's enough time to just slow the ship down and let the torpedoes sail by harmlessly. Whereas if you're shooting at, let's say, a Japanese battleship, which has a time of 24 seconds to get to full speed, which does not have a sonar, and which only will see the torpedoes relatively short in a relatively short amount of time before they're coming in, your chances of actually getting the torpedoes on target are much, much better. So choose your targets, observe your targets, try to put yourself in the target's situation. If you were that ship right now, what would you be doing? Would you continue sailing straight? Observe them. Are they continuing to sail straight and fire your guns? These are very good targets because they're very predictable. Or are they doing unpredictable movements? Are they engaging a ship that is in a different position? Are they likely to change course? All these are things that you can observe on a target while you're lining up your torpedoes, and you can use the torpedo indicator to find out where they're going, how they're changing their speed, because the torpedo indicator will change, and then you might need a different approach, or you'd pick a different target. So all these are things that are valuable to know when you're trying to line up stealth torpedoes. Now, there are more things you can do, obviously. There are destroyers out here. For example, if we look at the Soviet destroyers, they tend to have a relatively short range of torpedoes. So, for example, the Podvoisky has a torpedo range of 4.5 kilometers, but a base detection of 5.8 kilometers, which means that, no, you can't do this because the dotted line is going to be larger. The dotted circle is larger than the solid circle, which means you can't be unspotted when you're dropping your torpedoes. This is a very different playstyle and probably a topic for its own video. But if you're thinking about playing something stealthy, like the Pan-Asian destroyers, like the Japanese mainline destroyers with long torpedo ranges, like the British destroyers, they can do that as well. Familiarize yourself with all these factors and your targets, and then just practice and try to predict what your target is about to do. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.